Mr. President, for us it's a great honor that you are today with us. Thank you very much. Also, for us it's really greatest honor that today with us, our heroes, our soldiers, and thank you very much that you are with us. Thank you very much for what you are doing. Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister, members of the government, members of many delegations, parliamentarian delegations from Europe, delegations of European Parliament, representative of American Congress, ambassadors, excellencies, friends, thank you very much that today you are with us. The topic of our conference is Ukraine is in the center of the universe. We formulated it a little bit more softly. We said the future is being decided in Ukraine, but this is what we mean. Ukraine is in the center of the universe. I will explain now what I have in mind. And of course, if you want to talk about the universe, it's right to start from your family. My father and my mother, as a small boy and girl, for first time were evacuated from Kyiv in 1941 to Russia, beyond the Ural, to save them from the German Nazis. And second time, they were evacuated from Kyiv in 2022 to the Western Europe, and now they're in Germany to save them from the Russian Nazis. And from this family story, I want to draw three conclusions. First, how grateful we must be to all our partners who allowed millions of Ukrainians to evacuate to your countries. Thank you very much. Ukrainians will never forget this. Second, we can see now what many didn't realize. Ukraine, for centuries, was in the center of Europe, of European history. In 1941, the German Führer went to Ukraine because he needed it as a breadbasket for his empire. And in 2022, the Russian fascist, as we say, Russian Führer went to Ukraine because without Ukraine, he could not imagine his empire. And thought, in the contemporary world, Ukraine cannot be alone. Ukraine must go home where Ukraine belongs, to Europe. Therefore, Ukraine must be in NATO and in the European Union. Thank you. And now I will develop my second conclusion. I said that Ukraine was in the center, at the center of European history, even we didn't realize this enough. And now I believe that Ukraine even more central. Ukraine now is in the center of the history of the world. And now I will say something that maybe great historians in this room will disagree. But I'm not historian, I'm a metallurgical engineer, and I'm Ukrainian metallurgical engineer, and I think I have right to say something, and I believe this is true. This war in Ukraine is the most decisive and consequential war in human history. For avoidance of doubts, of course, with this I don't mean that amount of victims and sacrifice is the highest in the history, but I mean this is most consequential for the future. Now I'll try to explain. Today, two systems, two camps, democracy on one side and autocracy on the other side, are in a very strong competition as never before. And we don't know which system will win and dominate, democracy or autocracy. Of course, we all in this room, we are very strong believers in democracy, and we are sure that democracy will win. But this is not so obvious at all for all of humankind. And let's be honest to ourselves. In history, who wins is never predetermined. It's exactly in Ukraine where two camps, democracy, autocracy, oppose now each other. How this war ends will have colossal influence, or when billions of people will decide to go. People say China is watching what happens in Ukraine. Yes, but this is not the most important and consequential, most important and fundamental process. More important, I believe, is billions of people watching what happens in Ukraine, and what they see will strongly influence if they get closer to China or side with the United States and the West. If Ukraine will not win in this war, which is geographically limited, opposite side will have more allies, will get momentum, will dominate, and then the threat and danger, the conflict will be much broader. And the dilemma is very simple. Either we will win together in geographical and from military point of view, limited war in Ukraine now, or you and we and humankind will have to fight global conflict later. Also, many people think that Ukraine deflects attention from really global threats like climate change, artificial intelligence, injustice. But believe me, if Western camp losses in Ukraine, it's not so that then China or Russia will then accelerate their fight against climate change or for more justice in the world or for use of AI only for the good of humankind. The all hope for the future in these vitally important questions on democracies and democracy future depends on the victory of Ukraine. And with this, I hope that I gave you enough convincing arguments which support my case that this war is the most decisive and consequential war in the human history. Now, you know who is quite aware about how consequential this war is for the world? Ukrainian soldiers, heroes, who risk their lives and health every day. I have a great honor, as many in this room, I believe, also have, to talk with them, with some of them, often. And this is what they tell me. They fight in Bakhmut, but not for Bakhmut, I mean geographically. They fight, first of all, for their families, for independence of their country, but also for freedom, democracy, and future of all civilized world. They understand their historical responsibility. For them, this is source of great pressure, but also of great motivation. But do people in offices of governments in Washington, Berlin, Paris, etc., understand? On one side, of course, I believe, of course they understand, and we have to say many times, thank you to them for their greatest support. But from other side, I have, and I'm sure you have, and our soldiers have, many questions. I know, and you know, and soldiers know. If all necessary weapons had been provided to us in time, Ukraine would be in a completely different position now. Of course, we all understand the grave responsibility which all Western leaders have now. Of course, they must do all to avoid drawing their countries into the war. But let me tell you my understanding what distinguishes a good leader from the great leader. A good leader does what's needed when it's possible. And great leader does what's needed when it's needed. Western leaders have a chance to show their greatness now in this unique moment in history when the future of humanity is decided. They have to feel urgency of now. That's why we as YES see the main task of this conference in following, that you will bring this message to all decision makers in the West, message of urgency to act now for the future of all humankind. And last, thank you. Thank you. And last, Ukrainians have fantastic, great, powerful, inspiring story. But we know for story to change the world, it needs a great storyteller. And it so happened that Ukraine's president is one of the best storytellers on the planet. President Zelenskyy can tell this story fantastically. And what is especially powerful and decisive, that he started telling this story right from the beginning, from Kyiv. He made prologue to this story in 24th of February when he said just 3 words. We are here. And this is fundamental. It's mainly not about location of president and his team. It's about being in history. It means that Ukrainians were here, and Ukrainians are here, and Ukrainians will be here forever. And with this, I wish you productive conference. And now it's my greatest honor to welcome on this stage our Commander-in-Chief and President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
If I can, some words in English just to react on your speech, Victor, and then I will switch to our native language. From the very beginning, you told the story of your parents when they were so young, so small boy and girl, and I wish your parents not to be evacuated this short time. I hope that they will, no, hope is not our word, I'm sure that they will come soon to meet you and victory to independent Ukraine back. And my message to millions of our Ukrainians, families who are abroad now, and what we are fighting for, that such families like yours, that they will come to Ukraine back to, not back in USSR, back in independent Ukraine. It's very important. Thanks for this and glory for this, for our people and for our warriors. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.
Glory to Ukraine.
Шановні пані та панове,
Dear ladies and gentlemen,
дуже дякую за запрошення.
thank you for having me.
Всіх вас
Welcome everyone at the annual forum of the Yalta European Strategy. The topic of today is formulated, the future is being decided in Ukraine.
в Україні.
But when we are speaking
Держава Україна, ми
now in Ukraine, do we only mean the state of Ukraine? The war against Ukraine is the war against moral.
це захист,
The defense of Ukraine
це захист.
is primarily the defense of moral.
Коли говорять про Україну, йде
And essentially when they talk about Ukraine,
держави
they talk about aggression against our country,
перемогти.
about our capacity to win about courage of the Ukrainians, about our land, our skies, our Black Sea. That is the human, the geographical space of our nation where its destiny has been decided. The destiny not just of independent Ukraine, but also the stability of the rule of law that world has been used to it. And this is not always evident in the talks on and around Ukraine now. For many countries worldwide, Ukraine is not just a country in Europe defending itself against Russian aggression. It is also about one's personal and moral choice, the choice of something of true value, the choice of something one would rather believe in, the choice of one's topmost priority, the true one. Ukraine is now symbolizes the standard of freedom, and many countries worldwide recognize in it their own standards, their stance towards life and the value of life, the decent life, the protected life, where people do have importance. So whenever it is about Ukraine today, it is in reality about a huge moral realm, which is much wider than the mere territory of Ukraine. This is the distance from the Ukrainian trenches in Donbass and the east, all the way to the political cabinets worldwide. It's the distance which is more than the distance between friends talking about certain fundamental things. This is the realm that starts with our defendants in the Odessa Oblast, defending it from Russian missiles and Iranian shaheeds, towards representatives of international organizations bound to defend the international rule of law and global food security. This is the realm that spans between the Ukrainian nation and those who are strengthening us with their armaments, sanctions against Russia, their leadership role, and their consolidated position. This is the realm, the beginning of which starts at the wheels of the medevacs taking Ukrainian wounded soldiers from the front line, all the way towards gadgets in the hands of people looking for news from Ukraine, checking for interviews on Ukraine, looking what information to tweet about Ukraine. This is a huge space, a huge realm of daily moral choice made by people in the countries worldwide. And exactly in this realm, the future is being born. Dear friends, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, just remember where we were on 24th of February, when this horrible, atrocious, full-scale war of Russia against our country began. Putin did count on Ukraine remaining one-on-one with them, because some of the partners would be indifferent, some would be scared, some would be too slow. If this would have happened, Ukraine really could have been occupied. Then the military madness of Russia would turn into further aggression against other countries, spreading the flame of war further. Question is whether the whole objective of it would be just on territories of countries. Again, the current situation that we are in is thanks to the huge international realm. Putin is attacking not just Ukraine, but this moral realm of the world. This realm that is ultimately able to bring to responsibility any killers, any terrorists, any aggressors, provided this realm is mobilized enough. When we're talking about this war, we always mean moral. Everything about Ukraine or the war is about some moral basics, or shockingly about the lack of morals.
підтримувати Україну чи замість
Oh.
цього обирати
It's a matter of choice to support Ukraine or to remain indifferent, to
необхідних дій
act together,
виключно від однієї України, наполягати на
or
тому,
to expand some actions to be done exclusively by Ukraine itself, to think that Russia has to be made responsible for the genocide, and genocide it is, or rather to think about cutting on military expenses and with hopes that the problem of genocide will just vanish. So definitely it's all about morale. It's about the future of the human life, of the international relations that will either stay with moral basic tenets or not. If not, the whole humankind risks becoming the world of slaves. Slaves of such Putins,
своїх капризів.
able to kill because it fancies
Будь
them.
ласка, щоразу говорячи про Україну,
Every time
пам'ятайте, будь
when
ласка,
we talk about Ukraine, please remember
йдеться.
what it is all
Людська мораль
about.
повинна перемогти.
The human moral has to come victorious in this war. This is the matter not just of and for Ukraine as the nation. It's the matter for every one of us.
Кожного і кожної.
Ukraine is in every one of us, in everyone across the world who values the freedom, the human life, that the people have to be victorious over evil.
Конкретний успіх України
Our successes, our concrete successes in Ukraine depend not just on us, the Ukrainians, but also
моральний простір світу хоче
on the whole moral realm of the world, if it is willing
морально
to
змобілізований.
remain, if the world is able to remain mobilized. I truly, strongly believe in this.
We are here.
This is why we are here. Glory to Ukraine.
President, I thought we would get right into the heart of the conversation because you are. Yeah. Just make sure that we have this. Your English is pretty good, so I know that you can understand me, but like a good politician, you're giving yourself a little time to think.
No, I just have to show that that you are still better than me. Okay. It's okay. Too complicated
No.
for me. Okay, thank you so
Okay.
much. Yeah, I think
Yeah. So what I thought we'd do is just get straight into the heart of the matter, which is a number of people feel that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has not gone as well as was hoped. Give us your assessment of what has happened and why.
Thank you so much. До контрнаступу.
Regarding the counteroffensive,
Я вважаю, що важливо, що наша
what's important in my mind is that our servicemen go ahead and have initiative on our side. We should not compare what's happened yesterday with what we have today. We have to compare how and what we were in the past life, that is before the start of the war, before the start of the occupation of our nation. We've recovered and regained a great part of our territory. Yes, people tend to want everything and immediately. Understandably so, but this is not like a feature movie when everything might happen in an hour and a half. But the script is the same. Peace in Ukraine, for Ukraine.
на території всього континенту і в світі буде тоді, коли ми
And the peace here in Europe, in the whole continent of it, in the world, will happen as soon as we regain all of our territory. And we will do it.
складна війна.
You know, the war is a challenge, and it did complicate lots of processes. Some partners
Що там з контрнаступом?
would ask, well, What's up with the counteroffensive? What the next steps will be? My current answer is our steps are faster than new sanction packages. And I think that if we are fighting and if our price is the highest one in terms of people, our partners have also high stakes in terms of the security and safety of themselves, their families, and you may truly appreciate those values when you are occupied or about to be occupied. This is when you start valuing the life, the value of the moment, This is why we go ahead and we will come right to the end. Not to the end of our nation, but to the end of our neighbor, to the end of his life on our territory. And while there, in his territory, let him do whatever it pleases them. Just don't mess with our moral realm, with our independence, with our home life. We will do it for sure, I am sure. All our security and defense forces, I'm sure of them, as I'm sure of our defenders. Our people are strong. Yes, there's a cool down, a bit of cool down in the war. Indeed, it gets more complicated. Indeed, processes get complicated. Indeed, from sanctions to armament supplies. Yeah, that's it.
Do you believe that the armament supplies that are now coming into Ukraine are enough for you to be able to push forward? Do you think that has the problem been solved, or do you still feel that there needs to be a much faster pace of supply and more offensive weaponry delivered?
Well, there are specific armaments that we need, and it's not about believing or not believing. It's not about beliefs. It's not about musings. There's a very specific story behind, and it translates into very specific square kilometers and miles of our homeland. Every meter is one's life, and we're losing people on a daily basis. The high price of the war, it's not about the price of armaments, or maybe not just only about it. It's also about the highest value in human lives. The longer it goes, the more people are suffering. It's hard to tell how weapons affect the situation. If we talk specifically, directly, without any rhetoric, there's a certain effect from each armament. The stronger, the more potent it is, the faster we get. If there is no our present in the skies, only Russia is there, then definitely they would stop our counteroffensive or slow it down. So each question has very concrete, specific response. We highly value, we are deeply grateful to the United States, to our partners for their daily support.
Thank you so much.
So we are working on that on a daily basis. Yesterday we had a talk with the UK Prime Minister, and we've been working on a daily basis to increase weapons supply. But again, we have very specific requests, not just for something you have. There's an interesting story, to tell. Andriy does know about it. I think all the leaders know it. All the leaders of all the nations know us very well.
Where is your list? When we meet, she said, I know, you are, where is your list of weapons? So, I mean that she said very interesting that we had one meeting in EU in Brussels, and we had meeting with all the leaders. During one day, I don't remember, 15 hours, something like this. Our team, And we met with all the leaders, thanks Charles Michel, he gave us some room. And all the leaders, one after another, they came, and I had all these papers with weapon, what we need, and they came, and they said that after our meeting, oh, so you, Mr. President, you can, after your victory, now after your presidential time, you can work in any country you want in EU, because you know about our weapon more than we know. You know more what we have than, yes. So I mean that it's щоденна.
So this is really a hard, arduous daily work, and we are learning in the process. We are learning. Our servicemen are learning how to fight Russians. They know a lot already. Our drones appear, and their drones appear, Orlan's, Lancet, and yeah, the price is high. The toll is high. We do know that for sure, that the distance depends from the speed, like with vehicles. And yes, it can be risky. We are riding with 500 kilometers an hour speed, and yeah, losses are imminent. But the end of the war specifically depends on whether all the forces in the world unite for it.
You know, there are people in Europe and the United States who worry that if the West were to give you too many offensive weapons that would reach into Russia itself, it could trigger some kind of a nuclear retaliation from Putin. And in fact, Medvedev, former president of Russia, has openly said that he thinks that Putin should do this. What do you say to those people? What gives you confidence? You've spent time with Putin. What gives you confidence that he would not retaliate in that way?
First of all, you know, in my view, Putin is left with just one step. The one remaining is to instill fear in the West with his nuclear weapons. He's not going to threaten and instill fear in Ukraine. He will be doing that for the whole West. This is the crumbling point in the unity of the Western partners. This intimidation and the real fear of Putin being able to use his nuclear weapons. And he will be using that. I'm very much sure the period has started, and it will reach some high level in winter. There will be moments when they will be dragging the nuclear weapons from one territory to another in an attempt to exert this moral pressure on the West, primarily on the United States, because they will be also in this sensitive, crumbling time of pre-electoral season. I'd like to draw attention to the fact that it will be necessary for President Biden not to have any slightest doubt that the world and peace is ultimately stronger than any nuclear weapons, and that any state that still tie balancing. I had a very nice conversation with the Prime Minister of one of such countries, and it was done on his request, and I'm really satisfied with the talk. It's very important for such countries, such nations, to understand that we share same moral values. We may have different enemies, say in the eyes of Israel, though I still think that ultimately Russia has been the investor in any enemy of real life. This is very important. Everyone has to understand that. So if this is the fight for life or until the death, so let's opt for the fight for life. Because of that, yeah, there will be intimidations with nuclear weapons. And I do think that we will just have to survive through the time. This will be the winter time that we had blackouts in previous winter time. This winter will see blackouts and nuclear weapon intimidation times, simply because Putin has run out of his arguments in this aggression. So the bubble of him as a politician has burst.
Do you notice the difference on the battlefield? What do your soldiers and generals report to you about the battlefield now that Prigozhin is gone, the Wagner group is gone, or somewhat dismantled? Is there a difference on the battlefield that Ukrainians are noticing?
Look, in our case, grieving days of mourning when the sky lost Prigozhin, we didn't have any mourning over that. I would be frank with you. For us, it was the case of having one terrorist fewer. And I suppose that Russia has lost. The Russia that most unceremoniously has been raping and killing people left, right, and the center. I suppose this is a dramatic characteristic that their mercenaries have been so characteristic about. Not only the Wagner representatives, but Wagner have really played an important role in all that. I don't think that their strength has really crumbled. There is some analytical research into that, and this is true. Our guys are striving as best as they can. I believe that the morale with the Russians has really dropped because they have been trying to cover themselves with the Wagner representatives. They just tossed them forward. They tried to make lunges forward because otherwise these people would have died. I mean, the other servicemen. That's why using Wagner representatives and ex-convicts as the human shield is something that they have already lost, and for us it's definitely an advantage.
Early in the war, you held out some hope that China would take a more neutral position and not support Russia. You finally did speak to Xi Jinping. Is it your sense, for example, on the issue of nuclear weapons, have the Chinese given you any sense that they have counseled the Russians, they have told the Russians not to take that step? Is there any moderating influence that they are playing on the Russians?
In the first place, I suppose that in terms of the peace formula, on this platform, towards this formula, where we can engage in a dialogue with the global South, including the dialogue with the leadership, supreme leadership of China, this is playing an essential role. And these first inception steps have really contributed to what you said. There was a message conveyed by China directly to the Russian Federation. God forbid, if you begin to intimidate and still fear in the whole world using nuclear weapons against Ukraine or the whole world. And this was extremely critical. And I keep reiterating, do pay attention. There will be intimidation. It will persist. But there is a distance between intimidating and applying, utilizing. I think it matters not to panic, not to be panic-stricken, but to understand that we have to live somewhere in between this distance, within this corridor, and make right conclusions, proper conclusions. We have to engage China in our peace formula. We need to make sure that the Global South specifically gets on our side. This will definitely be really influential, will have to exert its influence. It will not be just about the political isolation of Russia, which is always followed by economic isolation, but military isolation likewise. These are extremely important steps. Therefore, the question Who is the president of Russia nowadays? Whether he's adequate or not, or not quite.
You talk about the importance of the global
У
south.
вас немає відповіді на це?
Do you happen to have an answer to this question? So you thought it was only a rhetorical question, that the rules are here for you to pose questions without me asking you any?
You can ask me as many questions as you like, Mr. President. I don't think I will have as eloquent answers as you, but I also get the sense that for China, for India, the use of nuclear weapons would be a very big step, and that Putin he's rational. I have always thought he's ruthless, he's evil, but he's rational in his own way.
Тому я і погоджуюсь.
This is why I do agree with you, and I would like to draw your attention to the fact what he has done to Prigozhin, that he keeps dragging nuclear weapons to and fro, these intimidations. This is all about his rationality. The fact that he got Prigozhin killed, in fact, we do have such information circulating. We don't have any other kinds of information with respect to this particular incident. So this is also speaking in favor of his rationality and his weakness, so politically he has become weakened.
You mentioned the global south. This is a big challenge. If you take the countries that are essentially kind of neutral on this war, China may be pro-Russia, India may be a little pro-Russia, Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa. You add it all up, it's the majority of the population of the world. What do you is there a path to changing this? What is your strategy? How are you thinking about this?
Our strategy in this regard, in the first place, I think that we are faring pretty well, because we have already had some meetings at the level of the councillors concerning the peace formula. This is a political part of this strategy, and we had a very fine meeting in Copenhagen. And afterwards, there was a meeting, you see, in the global south. We went to Jeddah, to Saudi. And I think that this is a very proper movement that we are undertaking, and there, in their respect, have been able to engage to this platform at the level of the councillors and advisors to represent the representations of the global south. And I think this was an essential step to undertake. Other countries added to that, the others that a few days before that had been balanced in trying to propose something separate, unlike our strategy concerning how to end this war. But we need to focus everyone on the same similar single platform. We need to drag them, beg your pardon, and then we will be able to hear all of your proposals and suggestions. That is to say, we have some things in common that all of us need. You don't want to protect Ukraine or defend Ukraine, okay? Protect the whole world from the nuclear attack. You are unwilling to protect Ukrainian farmers, all right? Then do protect your own people from hunger and famine. Therefore, joint common interests, they must always be at the stake. And I have always believed that these are our politically successful steps. There will be another meeting to follow, which is right now in the pipeline at the level of the advisors and councillors. And I suppose that this is going to be even more powerful. And after that, we will take it to the first summit of leaders. And I think that this will be the most complicated work to undertake. But for that summit, we will have to collect together and convene as many countries of the world as we can possibly do that.
When I talk to people in places like India and South Africa, there is a hope that there will be some negotiated end to this war, that there is some path which does not involve years and years and years of war. Is there, in your view, a prospect of a negotiated end to this war?
Буде кінець цієї війни.
There will be the end to this war, and Ukraine will definitely prevail. Of course, it's going to be complicated and arduous, and we understand. I have already spoken about this one political pathway. And there is very clear-cut understanding that in the battlefield you have to push forward and move forward, because this only is to strengthen our positions and the political stance that we assert. So eventually this will all be taking us closer to the end of the war. Russia has always been able to do that, and it will be able to do that if she withdraws all of its forces from our occupied territories.
So let me ask you an awkward question, but it's one that people certainly in the United States are wondering about and aware of. Is it your sense that Russia's strategy is to stay the course until the 2024 election, see who is the winner of the 2024 election in the United States, because that could have a big impact on the future of American support for Ukraine?
Of course, they're counting on that. They're counting on the American elections very much so, but I don't think this is their first attempt at that. The signals that they are emitting, that we are getting from different parts of the Republican Party in particular, although we have bipartisan support, we are enjoying the bipartisan support from the Congress, there are still some voices that are vocalizing the stance that they have to increase or decrease the support of Ukraine. But this is all about running the election campaign. And Putin knows about different political mottos and slogans being propelled during this time. He knows how everything will run before the end of elections in Russia. But in other democracies, it works out differently. There is competition. And during this competition, people involved, well, sometimes, sadly, populists behave in this way, and there are some other slogans that they utilize in order to join and rally different parts of the population, for them to exert influence on them and to gain support from this part of the population. But it's most important for the American population to maintain democracy and support us and in our values and in our fight for these values. And then no matter who this will be, no matter what time it will be, whatever post these people will take, whoever will take the post of the U.S. leader, they will always be leaning on the foundation, standing firm on the foundation, which is the public opinion of the United States. This is what matters most.
And what about in Europe? You have one leader, Viktor Orban in Hungary, who I think I'd be fair to say...
he thinks that he's a leader in Europe. You know, there are so many countries.
But unfortunately, there is an election in Slovakia, the 30th of September. The person leading in the polls there essentially calls himself an ally of Orban, also argues that the European Union should stop all military aid to Ukraine immediately. Then that would put two people in the European Union making this argument. Do you worry about the loss of European support?
Let me repeat myself. The public and the society always plays the most important role. And of course, leaders can always ricket the public opinion and make the people vacillate. But it seems to me that the European market, which is something about 600 million, it's a strong economy. And these are the people whose opinion really matters. A great number of businesses, hundreds of millions of people. It's not that easy to bust all that, to destroy it overnight and change the whole public opinion just like that. Secondly, the prime ministers. As far as I know, there is a very powerful president of Slovakia, Zuzana Čaputová. She's a strong individual, and she sides with Ukraine 100% because she sides with the people, common people. And we enjoy very fine relations, very good relations indeed. Perhaps probably a certain balance of forces will be stricken. But anyways, the Slovak Republic will opt for the narrative of the leader of Hungary. Whether this will happen, I'm not sure about that. We'll be working, of course, concerning that. With regard to that, they told us about the same. In Bulgaria, they didn't manage to do so. They failed. There are some difficulties, issues concerning the grain deal and stuff like that, but we will overcome all of these difficulties. Most importantly, we do enjoy the support of the population much higher than it was previously, some time ago in Bulgaria, for example. And I would also like to draw your attention to the support that we wage in Hungary. common, ordinary people, they are also siding with us. They are also suffering. It's hard for them. They're struggling because they live in this informational space where their leader is maintaining another opinion. Unfortunately, sometimes in some ways, he wants to side with the Russian leader. However, honestly speaking, the European Union has been able to get united and implement sanction packages, as well as support Ukraine concerning our candidacy status for the EU membership. Therefore, of course, there are some complications with reference to Hungary and other representatives of the EU. But just like I said at the very beginning, the war is getting slower, and all of the processes and complications and difficulties likewise. However, we will be fighting, overpowering all that, but it matters for the European Union to continue being very clear concerning the European law. And even if 2, 3, even 5 countries in Europe get to block or should get blocked the grain life of our country or other countries, they still have to be resilient and steadfast, because nowadays 30 countries is still a strong, powerful fist which sides with Ukraine.
Let me just take a moment here and ask, we have the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson, here. And on this crucial issue of the West maintaining support, maintaining unity, I just wanted to know if you have any thoughts or maybe something you want to say.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a great honor to be here in Kyiv, and as ever, I'm lost in admiration for what the people of Ukraine are doing, for the heroism of the armed forces of Ukraine and the inspiration of the leadership of President Zelenskyy, Volodymyr. I think what you're doing is incredible. You're doing it for Ukraine, but you're also doing it for the whole world. And I think you're right. The conversation's been exactly, and Victor's introduction was completely right. This is a critical moment, and what the world needs is strategic patience and strategic continence. Everybody just needs to stick with Ukraine, because you are going to win. Ukraine will win, and it may take time. And I think the lesson that we're all learning is that we just need to recognize it may take a bit longer, it may take till next year, maybe the year after. But your question, Fareed, is the West going to remain united behind Ukraine? I think overwhelmingly the answer is yes. And whatever happens in the United States of America, there's the one insight that I feel very strongly this morning. I do not believe that any president of the United States of America would be so foolish as to pull the plug on support for Ukraine. It is massively, overwhelmingly in the strategic interests of the United States, for the reasons that Victor spelt out earlier on, to continue right through to the end. And there's only one end. I don't believe in a negotiated solution with Putin. I don't see how that works. I think the only end is Ukrainian victory. So glory to Ukraine, and keep going.
Thank you so much. You remember when Boris came first during the full-scale war, and thanks so much, you supported us so strong. It was very important. All these signals who've been here during all this challenging period, and not all of our friends been here. I mean, not all of our partners, but all of our friends been here. Thank you so much, Boris. He said it first. We had tete-a-tete, but now you are not prime minister. But who knows? I will be careful. Who knows? Yeah. And so you said you have to win. That was on our tete-a-tete meeting. You said we have to do. It doesn't matter anything. Ukraine has to win. We'll do it. We have.
this idea of strategic patience seems to me a very important one and a useful one. And for those worried about America, I will just remind you, the United States has been able to stay the course for a long time, a lot longer than people remember. We are still on the banks of the Rhine. We are still in Okinawa. We are still in South Korea. And we will be in Ukraine, I think, I hope. Anyway, turning to Ukraine. Are you going to have elections?
You will decide. Дивіться,
Look, as regards the elections, we are ready. There's no question about it. This is not a question of democracy or something like that. This is exclusively an issue of security. So let's go through this over again. I don't mind. We've had representatives of the United States who raised that issue publicly. There are some answers which we have to give to each other, and this is realistic. We have to do everything possible to make sure that our military can vote, those in the trenches, at the front line, because they're fighting for the rights of our people, and being disenfranchised for them is out of the question. Obviously, this is point number one. I told the State Secretary of the U.S., Blinken, that much. It's not that he was pushing us towards something. I don't want this to be floated in the U.S. or wherever. We were also talking about observers. We want the elections to be public, open, and transparent. And how can they attend the polling stations near the trenches? For us, it's important not just to hold elections, but to have the election legitimate. And going back to the issue of our neighbors, for us, the recognition of the results of our elections by the world is key, because we are a democratic country. This is something we are fighting for. That's why the recognition and legitimacy of our election is absolutely key. Now, the third point, as regards Ukrainians abroad. There are millions of Ukrainians there. How can they vote? There's no proper infrastructure in place. So we should make sure that two things happen. Proper infrastructure should be broadened not just by our representation offices and embassies, but also the infrastructure in countries like Poland, Germany, Romania, where there are a lot of Ukrainian refugees. They should provide their own infrastructure for that, or we have to hold elections online in those countries. And that is complicated. And the question to our partners, will you recognize the outcomes of such an election? I doubt. And a question to our parliament, will you support changes to the electoral code? I don't know. Or will we have to write letters to each other and vote by that manner? Obviously, probably we could live with all that and do something about it. But what should we do about the territories which are temporarily occupied by the enemy, and about the people who live there? Ukrainians are all important, but people who are under occupation since the 24th of February, what are we supposed to do with them? How are they going to express their will during the elections? There are a lot of complications, plus the financial aspect. But all that definitely could somehow be worked around. We could do something about it. But what to do with people who are not here now, and they're going to vote for their future, and we need to give them a chance to do so. This is absolutely key. And the final point, it's not pro or con as regards the elections. I'm ready for elections. If this is needed for our people, primarily for our people, why not? Let's go ahead. Well, the last point and argument can be this. We now have a challenge of integration with the EU, for instance, and there are some draft laws that the Parliament has to put in place and support. And I can tell you frankly, if the Parliament does this and again, against this backdrop, there are all the challenges which I enumerated already. I think that the priorities should be clear-cut.
Mr. President, finally, I just want to ask you to give us a sense as to how you and your wife and your family are holding up. This has been 600 days of war. I suspect this has been 600 days of work for you. Do you, at times, do you get depressed? How do you handle that? Where do you, how do you think you can keep going for another 600, another 1,000 days like this?
Do I need to withstand another 600 days?
Well, people say it's going to be a long war.
People always know. The question is, what do you think? Ми витримуємо, скільки б днів не було.
We will stand fast no matter how long it takes. I'm looking at our military, at our heroes, and I record one of them now. And there is a candle burning there, and we all understand that their sacrifice should not be in vain. We cannot stop. If we do, then the question will arise, what did they sacrifice their lives for? We cannot give up, because those guys who lay down their lives, they have their families, they have their kids, and if we give up, we will just spit in the face of their children, and that would be utterly unfair. That's why we will last as long as it takes. And I believe, and I hope, that it'll be faster than what people say. As regards myself, I don't suffer from depression. I'm totally sane. I look into the mirror and I see that I'm growing older and my wife is growing more beautiful. That's it. She's doing a terrific job. She's very powerful and strong, and I'm very gratified that my family today is with Ukraine, with our people, and they show by their own example that we cannot say to people, don't regard the security. We have to send some messages to people, and we have to take care of people's security. And we need to send the right messages to our people. There is no law in Ukraine that all the families and children of people in government have to be here. This is a free country, but we have an opportunity to use our own personal example and stay put. And I think that this is the most important thing, leading by example, without extra rhetoric and extra words.